Hello, everybody. Hello, Mr. Netanyahu. Iddo, I'll be
How do you
calling
do?
you
Nice.
in the course of
Ito
our
is fine,
conversation.
absolutely.
I'm so happy to see you. And due to, I made some adjustments to my wardrobe. So, I noticed it, people. It's not because I forgot about it. Anyway, I'm in the United States. Iddo Netanyahu, author, playwright, and physician, is in Israel right now. Netanyahu family is closely associated with the United States. All of them speak perfect English, but we speak English with some accent. And it's very important for me to have this conversation with you, Ido, because you are on the ground there. And let me start with the questions. How do you defeat a death cult?
It's a good question. I don't usually say that to questions, but it's not a death cult. It's an ideological movement. Hamas is part of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood, as is ISIS. ISIS is the same thing. This is on the Sunni side of the radical Muslim equation. And despite what you hear all the time about the Sunni and the Shiite war to the death, struggle to the death, we know that Iran, which is the ultimate Shiite nation, a radical Shiite nation, is supporting this Sunni organization that's the Muslim Brotherhood. And not only is Iran supporting it, Hezbollah is also supporting it from Lebanon, and they're also Shiites. So you have here two radical Muslim organizations, and they state that they want to vanquish the West, and they want to have Islam rule the world. This was stated by the head of Hamas, a famous sheikh, who a few days before he was assassinated, many years ago when Sharon was our prime minister, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, in the radio interview, said that the goal of Hamas is the ultimate rule of Islam all over the world, over the entire world. These are their aims. This is the aim also of the radical Islam from the Shiite side. So it's not a cult of death. They don't want to die. They want to have their ideology be the ideology of the world, their religion to be the religion of the world. They want to force their ways, their medieval and primitive and barbaric ways upon the world. This is not a death cult. This is a cult, and they believe many times they're willing to die for it. Okay, how do you fight it? You cannot defeat it without recognizing this factor. You cannot defeat it by thinking that ISIS warriors or terrorists became that way because they had a very difficult childhood because of poverty. This is what the West thinks all the time. They don't. The West does not want to admit that the problem is ideological, that it is a clash between two types of civilization, that there's a threat of the radical Islam over the entire world. The West has been refusing all these years to admit to it. So yes, they defeated ISIS, but something else will spring up. It doesn't matter. You have to fight the ideology. You have to fight the radical clerics in the mosques who espouse this ideology. You have to stop the contributions to this ideology, and it's being not only in the Western world, but you also have to force the Muslim world to stop it. This is what they're trying to do in Egypt, for instance. The Muslim Brotherhood is not permitted by law. All these things in Saudi Arabia has recently changed course from radical Islam to a different type of Islam. They saw that they made a big mistake. This is how you defeat it. You defeat it, first of all, because you vanquish those who are using arms in order to slaughter you. What we're doing now in the Gaza Strip, those have to be defeated completely. But then you have the problem of the population of the Gaza Strip. Okay, they're the ones who voted Hamas into power. They had elections there. Now, to what extent they were forced to vote for them or not, I don't know. But they have a very big support. And the reasons why we haven't had elections in the West Bank for, I think, 18 years now is because we know that if there will be elections in the West Bank, Hamas will gain power. So there's no elections there. So the problem is the underlying support of certain Arab populations and Muslim populations for these radical groups who use extreme terrorism, who use the tactics of the Nazis, basically worse, in some ways worse than the Nazis.
How is it possible that such a small I'm sorry. How is it possible that such a small country, with insignificant population numbers-wise, standing in the way of the whole Arab world or the radical whatever, any part of Arab world is bigger than the population of Israel and geography of Israel, the chunk of land that takes up Israel. Why they don't just move to the greatness without paying attention to the Israel's presence there? And just go about their thing. That just pay no attention. If you think you're destined for greatness, just do your great thing. So why Israel is in the way? Why does it bother them so much?
Well, they explain all these years. They explain why, because they consider, first of all, they consider all land that was ever ruled by Islam to be Islamic land. That the non-Islamic entities have no right to it. Now, the land of Israel has been ruled ever since Muhammad, or the followers of Muhammad, conquered it in the 7th century. It was ruled by Islam, whether it's the Arabs or afterwards mostly the Turks, for hundreds of years. Turks as, of course, a Muslim power. This was Muslim territory, okay? And all of a sudden they got it out of their hands. Now, initially by England, which in World War I conquered the country. And then afterwards, once we kicked out the British, by the Jews, okay? And the Jews are supposed to be not even a people, they're supposed to be a religion. How come all of a sudden, how is it possible that they rule a country that is in the heart of the Arab world? This is intolerable to them, absolutely intolerable to them. And this is why they have been waging a constant war all these years against Israel. Now, first it was the Arab nations, almost all of them. Some were forced. Basically, they saw they could not defeat Israel. We beat them. We won war after war after war until some of them finally gave up, such as Egypt, such as Jordan. And now with some agreements we had with other Muslim countries, other Arab countries, not necessarily Muslim. But the radical elements of the Arab world, the radical elements of Islam, such as those of the Muslim Brotherhood, and such as Hezbollah in the north, and they're not the Muslim Brotherhood, but they're radical Shiites that are being influenced by Iran, refuse to accept the fact that Israel has a right to exist, that the Jews have a right to a country of their own. And these elements keep on fighting in the hopes that they will vanquish Israel. Now, the Palestinian Arabs are a group unto itself. The political entity of the Palestinians was formed during the 1920s and 1930s, when the Jews were trying to form their own country, when Jewish immigration started coming in after World War I, after the Balfour Declaration by the League of Nations. We were supposed to create a Jewish state. Britain received a mandate to control the area in order to create a Jewish state. Now, they reneged on their mandate. They did everything they could to block Jewish immigration and prevent the creation of a Jewish state. But finally, we were able to drive them out and create our own nation. But in the meantime, the local Arabs became politically motivated very much against the idea that the Jews will control this country. And their leader was a man called Haj Amin al-Husseini, whom the British installed. They installed him because they knew he was a radical anti-Zionist. So he was
the Mufti of Jerusalem, right?
The Mufti of Jerusalem. He became sort of the political leader of the Palestinian movement and agitated against the Zionist cause very much, ended up being a supporter of Hitler and of the Nazis, spent World War II in Berlin and also in Yugoslavia, where he helped create Muslim SS groups to exterminate the Jews. He was very much for extermination of all the Jews.
20,000. Some say that he gave Hitler, which is, of course, is not true. He gave Hitler an idea to burn the Jews.
No. Hitler, of course,
he on his own.
did not need him to give the idea, but he was very much intolerant of any kind of lull in the extermination of the Jews. So this is the history in a nutshell of the Palestinian Arabs, or of the political, of those who, I would say, took over the Palestinian national movement. And they continued with this after Israel was created in the places where they were at, whether it's Jordan, whether it's Egypt, whether it's other places. Arafat came from Egypt.
Was he also related to Al Husseini, Yasser Arafat?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, there's I read someplace that he's
it doesn't matter.
his uncle. Yeah,
but their whole ideology is the ideology that the Jews are not allowed to have a state of their own. That this entity, they call it the entity, needs to be eliminated. And Hamas is merely one of the outgrowths of this Palestinian movement, political movement, influenced, as I said, by the Muslim Brotherhood. And Hamas states in its charter that Israel must be destroyed. And indeed, not only should Israel be destroyed, the Jews, as a Jew, should be killed. The other, I would say less religious, but they're all religious, group is the PLO, which is basically the most important portion of the Palestinian Authority, or the Palestinian Liberation Organization, that was created in 1964. Now it's being run by Mahmoud Abbas. And in English they will talk about peace and all that, but what they're interested in is also the creation of a state, which will be an Arab state. Maybe they're willing to leave some Jews in the Arab state. I would not trust them in any way. I think if they had a chance, if they had the power, they would liquidate us as well.
Listen,
so this is the story in a nutshell of why these people want to destroy Israel and why these people want to kill the Jews.
I'm looking at the front page of New York Times today online, and it looks like the major.
Why are you doing that? It's a big mistake. It's okay.
You should supposed to know. You served in you served in Sayeret Matkal.
It'll give you a heartache. Heartburn. Don't
That's
do it.
the newspaper that does not believe that the rocket, the Palestinians' rocket fell on the hospital. It does not believe that it wasn't Israel who caused this explosion. There was 500 dead, as I say. And we've seen so many, those who follow the war in Ukraine, they know how those rockets explode. We see a lot of them in the last 2 years. And of course, Israeli American rockets are much better than the Russian ones. But anyway, the explosion was so massive that it just not any rocket. It's pretty serious. Some say cache of weapons was stored in this hospital, and this is how they actually fight this Palestinian savages. They call them in press, in American press. So you can, it's an allowed expression and nomenclature. So it exploded there, and of course there's no proof of that so far, but pretty much clear by everybody else but New York Times and Associated Press that it was of Palestinian, the Gazans' own doing, of Hamas's own doing, or PJI.
It's Islamic Jihad. Yeah.
Islamic Jihad, yeah, that's newer information, and of course they promised the record, the tape, as they say. Still, they promised the tape of their side of the story. I don't think it ever came out so far. So, what do you think of that?
No, we proved already that this explosion was caused by a misfire of a rocket of the Islamic Jihad. About, I think, 25% of the rockets misfire and explode inside the Gaza Strip. Okay, So it would not be surprising that one of them, it happened to one of them. And yes, they store a lot of their ammunition and stuff like that near hospitals, using, of course, as we know, using civilians as a shelter, which is the reason why they're trying to prevent their own civilians from flowing to the south of the Gaza Strip before the Israeli onslaught in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. They want to use them as human shields and want to also accentuate the loss of lives among their own people. It's actually, look, when I'm saying they're worse than the Nazis, in some ways they are, because the Nazis, in several ways, okay? The Nazis did not, when they slaughtered and killed the Jews in the Holocaust, they tried to do it behind closed doors. They tried to hide it, okay? Also, not to be responsible, you know, if they lose the war, okay, not to be put to death because of it, but also because they knew that part of the German population would not stomach it. That's the honest truth. Here they glorify in their savagery. They videotape what they do. They show it to the whole world, and they parade these things in front of their population. Because they know that probably a huge percentage of the population supports it, and even if they don't support it, they won't say anything. Okay, they're too afraid. Secondly, these are the same people who use their own children as fodder in order to die. These are the people who sent, during the time of the suicide bombings, they would send, you know, whatever, 20 years ago that Arafat orchestrated in all the parts of Israel. This was more than 20 years ago, 20 some years ago. In all parts of Israel, the suicide bombings, they would send children with suicide vests to go to their death, their own children. Mm. And you know, when I, in 2004, I just looked it up, I saw it, I wanted to see what I wrote. In 2004, I wrote an article in a magazine, a monthly magazine called Koteret, and I was writing the article against the idea of pulling out from the Gaza Strip, because the government was planning to do it, and the whole press was supporting it, and yes, we have to leave the Gaza Strip, I wrote there an analysis of why we should not do it, why it's too dangerous. I won't get into the argument, it's not that important. I mean, basically, I foresaw what's happening, more or less what's been happening over the years, the rocket attacks and everything. But what I said there, I said, who will rule the Gaza Strip? It'll be people, murderers of the worst kind that humanity has seen. This is specifically what I wrote there. This will be Hamas, this will be either Hamas, PLO, Islamic Jihad. These are the worst murderers, among the worst murderers that humanity has seen. And they will be the ones rooting the Gaza Strip, and it'll become a state of terror on the borders of our villages and our towns nearby. And it will cause the whole Middle East to be unsettled. And the reason I knew that these are the kinds of people is because I saw what they did all these years. Look, the Palestinian movement, they call it national movement, whatever it is, that's how they've been behaving all this time. In the 1920s, they went into the Jewish community of Hebron, which had lived there for hundreds and hundreds of years, and slaughtered the community. The scenes are apparently horrific, and we shouldn't be even talking about it. This was in 1929. In 1936 to 39, they went on a roller coaster of slaughtering civilians, Jewish civilians, of course, and many hundreds of Jewish civilians in Palestine at the time were killed in the most horrendous ways. In the War of 48, there was the famous convoy of nurses and doctors to Hadassah Hospital in Mount Scopus in Jerusalem. It was attacked, a convoy of medical people It was attacked by the Arabs, and they died to a man. They slaughtered more than 100 people, I think it was. Nurses, doctors, whoever was there. We know their savagery. We know their savagery, and we saw their savagery also before and after the Oslo Accords, how they behaved towards us. So to me, it was obvious that if you let these people control a territory, they will control it, they'll have arms, they have the means, and the terror will be horrendous, which is what we saw happened 12 days ago. Because they know no limits. They know no limits. And what's uppermost in their mind is to destroy Israel and to kill the Jews. This is what they believe in. Their ideology forces them to do this. Just like the anti-Semitic ideology of the Nazis allowed them, motivated them to kill the Jews, and the power that they had. I mean, they basically took over a huge nation, Germany, and then took over all of Europe, allowed them to destroy millions and millions of Jews.
Yeah.
There's no difference in many ways between the two. I think in some ways, Hamas is even worse.
Anti-Semitic ideology is no surprise, and it indeed served as a mortar in many, many world events. And World War II is a more morbid example of all this, where some nations greeted the Nazis in the territories that they would finally rid them of Jews. And now we have all those demonstrations. As I said, anti-Semitism is nothing new, but we see all those demonstrations all over the world with Palestinian flags. It's not necessarily all that the marching crowds are all Arabic or Palestinians. There's a lot of kids and old fools who are not supposed to be there, but they're there. They root for the destruction of their own country. Many of them are professors. Many of them are professionals. Most of them, of course, as I said, are students. What do you think? Why all this suddenly? Is there some sort of organization behind it, or it's a natural urge, natural, like we have this some diseases? You tell me which ones. They live. You're a doctor within the human body, and the certain conditions they manifest itself.
You talk about
like
anti-Semitism.
Shingles, like shingles. Yeah, that I could remember.
Anti-Semitism.
Anti-Semitism, and that produced those demonstrations. All those.
The demonstrations are a combination of anti-Semitism and once again anti-Western and anti-Zionist ideology. It's not pure anti-Semitism, but it's certainly anti-Semitism plays a very strong role in it, and it's in many ways anti-Semitism also plays a strong role in the workings of the PLO and of Hamas. They've been educated from childhood with anti-Semitic slogans, and so that definitely has a role. As to what's the cause of anti-Semitism, this is a huge question that's been scholars have been debating for years and years. What is this phenomenon? This phenomenon that causes the world, certainly in the West now, not only in the West but in other parts. When I say the West, I'm talking about also, of course, Russia. To hate the small people, very small people all over the world. Why are these people hated so much? And this is a very big conundrum. But in any case, I won't go into the causes of anti-Semitism. My father actually researched it, and in his magnum opus about the origins of the Spanish Inquisition, the opening chapter is a chapter that analyzes how anti-Semitism started, where it was created. And it was created in ancient Egypt, about 300 years before the rise of Christianity. We won't go into it, but it was into how it was created, but it then spread throughout the Eastern Mediterranean, then spread throughout the Roman Empire. It's become so ingrained in the human mind and the Western mind that, of course, getting rid of it is almost impossible. I mean, you become an anti-Semite because you grew up with anti-Semitic parents, and they teach you, and grandparents. And it's a natural thing. And this thing sometimes lies dormant, but then when conditions change, whether political or economic, then it rises. And
Yeah, and then
it's there. It's there in the human population. I would say, you can call it the virus if you want to, shingles, whatever you want to, except that shingles erupts very rarely, and this erupts very frequently.
Yeah,
You're not going to get rid of anti-Semitism. What I'm saying is, and this is why the state of Israel was created. It was created because the founders of Zionism, men such as Herzl, realized that it's impossible to fight anti-Semitism. It doesn't. You can do whatever you want. It won't go away. Not only did he know that anti-Semitism won't go away, he also understood that if the Jews do not leave Europe, they will be liquidated. He wrote that very clearly in his writings. So some people forecast the Holocaust years before it occurred. Herzl was motivated very much by his fear that the Jews would be destroyed, and he worked very actively in order to create a Jewish state very quickly, which he tried to do. It was created 50 years to the day from the day that he convened the first Zionist Congress. Unfortunately, it was created several years after World War II. Had it been created 10 years earlier, the Jewish world would have been different completely, and 6 million people would not have been destroyed.
Yeah, so true. But what is the place of the infamous self-hating Jew of the United States, of this image that is created, and a lot of people who I don't know if you are so lucky as I do to know so many people who would fall into this category. They're a big part of this movement. They are creators of this image in the mass media, in mainstream media, of the Jewish people who are on the side of on the wrong side of history. I would say it becomes clearer, and for not good reason. Every day gets clearer and clearer that those people are on the wrong side of history. Those who are being Jewish oppose what Israel is doing, and basically fracture the society here in the States and in Israel as well.
I don't know what the wrong side of history means. They're on the wrong side of human events. Okay, they're on the wrong side of morality and justice. They claim that they're on the right side. Look, we always had Jews who were not very comfortable in their Jewishness. And we always had Jews who were very much against the idea that the Jewish people is more than just a religion, that the Jewish people is a national entity. Once again, we won't go into the history of the Jews, but ever since the French Revolution, which afterwards, for the first time, the Jews were offered equal rights. The French National Assembly asked the Jewish people, they said, we'll give you the rights, but you have to let us know, are you a separate nation from the French, or are you part of the French people? And for the first time in history, in the history of the Jews, they came and they answered and they said, we are not a separate people. We're simply a religion. We're Frenchmen of the Mosaic faith. And that then became, I would say, a course of events also in Germany, when it gave them equal rights in other places. And so with the emancipation of the Jews, there were many Jews who forsook their national identity, who said, "We're in no ways are we a people, in no ways are we a nation." And they even, created in Germany, they created the Reform movement, which tries to do away with all the very difficult tasks to do to restate the Jewish religion in such a way that it has no connection to your national identity and a very limited connection to the land of Israel and to the fruit trees that grow in the land of Israel. All these things, a very difficult task to do, but they somehow managed to do it. It's veered away back in many ways, at least in America. Some of the reform movement has veered back to pro-national sentiment. But yes, you have throughout history, in the last several hundred years, many Jews who are against the idea of a Jewish nation, especially Jews of the West, and who are very much against the Zionist movement. And in the East, the Jews were either Zionists or communists. Those who were against the national movement went for communism because communism was the international movement. Okay, this was the major appeal of communism, not so much the communist economic ideology. The fact that communism was talking about that there are no more nations. There are just the workers of the world unite.
Communist International.
The workers, and this appealed very much to many Jews. They thought this would solve the Jewish question. This would solve anti-Semitism once and for all.
Woodrow Wilson was sympathetic.
There's always been this element, and this element that is anti-nationalist. Now you have to put on top of that the current anti-national movement in the West in general. Okay, not only among Jews but among a lot of the progressives. That they abhor the West. They abhor the idea of nationalism in the West. They want to do away with the notion of borders, of national entities. And to them, Israel symbolizes the worst of the national entities. Okay, this is a country that tries to promote its own specific national identity and fights for it. And shuts and closes its borders off to people who try to invade it or try to come in, who are not part of the Jewish people. So this is anathema to them, and so they are against the Jews. And these are Jews who don't necessarily hate Jews, but they hate the idea of the state of Israel, and they want to show the world that they are not part of all of this. Okay, to me, it's a sickness, it's an illness, but this is how I explain it.
Speaking of sickness,
and by the way, you have to realize that they all went through the academia. Well, a lot of them are going through the academia where this is what they're being taught. Okay, it's for a child who's 18 years old. He might have thought differently up to the age of 18. Once his professors talk that way, once this is the ideology that he hears, these things influence him to a great degree. They might hopefully grow out of it over the years, but maybe it'll happen. You have to keep optimism.
Of course, the garden needs to be tended to, and everything takes attention. You know, people say that you set it on autopilot, and the civilization goes chugs along, you know, merrily to its destination, which is, of course, a happy place. But it's not happening. So my next question is about the tunnels. Can you offer anything, any thinking of yours, how to get those people out of the tunnels? In Gaza, where they hold the hostages.
If I had a great idea, I certainly would tell you, because then other people, Hamas, would know about it. Look, I'm not a military expert by any means, and this is not for me to say how to go about doing it. I think the Israeli army has some experiences. Other armies, including the American army, and other armies have probably greater experience. In Vietnam, certainly, there was the tremendous tunneling there. It's basically infantry warfare. It's going to be a difficult fight. In order to clear Gaza of Hamas and exterminate it, you have to bring in the infantry. There's no other way of doing it. And this, and as you know, invading a territory that is being defended by booby traps and by tunnels and by various means of defense is very costly. And unfortunately, it'll take long. It won't be easy. And it'll also cost lives, I hope, as few as possible, but I'm afraid that there will be quite a few soldiers who will lose their lives in doing this, but this has to be done. And then you have the problem of the population. Okay, you destroy 40,000 or whatever Hamas terrorists. Well, what do you do with the population that supports them?
Yeah.
And how do you whatever you do, you have to make sure that you do not allow a military force of this kind to arise again. If it means going back there every day or every week with your army, then do it. Don't let them grow and grow and grow again to become what they are now.
What's happening in Israel is happening there not to the same intensity as right now, but I in my programs I say we are fighting on three fronts. One front is the United States, is an attack against the American way of life that's going on on our land, and the rule of law is being broken by those who rule the law. And then we had the Ukraine, where we had this attack by Putin, and the fight goes on there. And now we have this attack on Israel. And what is common to me, for me, what is common between those three countries, it's the appearance of a new person who would change things to various degree depending on the country, but who would change lives in those countries according to a new vision, which some call inappropriate and consider inappropriate. So this is this a war that goes on humanity, in my humble opinion. And what I see in the news is that the arms that are discovered, the arms cache that was discovered after the hottest phase of the attack on Israel territory was mines and RPGs and handguns and machine guns, all made in China, Russia, and North Korea. What was and some Iranian hardware as well. So, what does it tell us about the center where it all comes from? Is it the countries behind the curtain, so to speak? Those
It's
three
certainly,
countries:
it's certainly
Iran,
Iran.
Russia, and China.
It's not Russia and it's not China. It's certainly Iran. They are their main bankroller, and Iran can purchase arms anywhere. And you can purchase a Russian arm if you want to, or a Chinese armament. It's not very difficult. But
I live in New York. I can't.
okay, well, whatever. If you go underground, you can purchase. Okay, plenty of Kalashnikovs, AK-47s.
I'm kidding.
Anyway, but no, the place where these arms were made is irrelevant, I would say. But certainly Iran is the bankroller. How these arms are smuggled into the Gaza Strip, I imagine, through the tunnels that exist between the Sinai Desert that belongs to Egypt and the Gaza Strip. There was apparently a constant inflow of arms and various military means into the Gaza Strip. And they found their way, of course, to Hamas, who were importing them, and then found their way into Israel in the attack.
In Israel, you may have missed this. I'm sorry to interrupt, but in Israel, you may have missed this because you're busy with more important things. But here in the United States, especially if you're watching the news and reporting on them on YouTube, just making sense of it all, we could not pass by the Ostankino TV tower in Moscow being colored the Hamas colors and the Russian flag at the bottom. And the Russian government, Putin himself, they're all trying, and TV, of course, which is part of the government in Russia, whatever the government is there.
Russia right now gets
straight
support.
on the side of Hamas. They don't support Israel at all.
Right now. Yeah, because they're dependent in some ways on Iran. Iran is giving them armaments. Putin was actually very, a certain period of time, he was very helpful to Israel and basically turned a blind eye on the Israeli attacks on Syria, which was basically directed against Iran because the Iranians were trying to ship in arms through Syria into Lebanon. Putin or Russia controlled the airspace of Syria. And for years, there was an understanding that Israel would attack these places. And now he's playing a political game. Unfortunately, I think he's making a big mistake. Iran right now gives him arms, but Iran hates the whole concept. You see, the Iranian mullahs really do believe in what they say. When these people say these things, you have to believe in them. And they are for creating a Shiite dynasty that will control the world. This is what they're aiming at. This is what they talk about. When Hitler talked about these things, people said, he's just saying it. He's exaggerating. He doesn't know. These people are directed by their ideology, unfortunately. And therefore, the same thing is true about Iran. Okay, they're trying very hard to get a nuclear weapon because once they have a nuclear arsenal, they will control the Middle East. Okay, and this will be a danger to Russia as much as it will be to Israel and to America and to Europe. And this is what Russia, unfortunately, does not understand. They should be, and Russia has a huge problem with also with radical Islam inside its own country and on its borders. And this will influence the Islamic states next to Russia, that are next to Iran, once Iran has a nuclear arsenal. Russia should be the first country that should be opposing what Iran is trying to do. I hope that they get some sense, understand this. I hope that Western Europe understands this and get some sense. Maybe this attack by Hamas that has been, of course, it would not have happened without Iranian support. Maybe this attack will put some sense to these people. I hope it will put sense into the leaders of Russia once they think things through and once the war with Ukraine is settled one way or another. I hope that once the war with Ukraine is settled, they will change course. I believe they will, by the way. I don't think they're blind to the dangers of Iran. I really don't believe it.
You know, I watched a few of your interviews, and I noticed that there is one thing that one matter that bothers both of us is the condition of the world elites. We are used to an idea that there is an elite in this world, and used to be less so concerning when we had the monarchies prevailing, but in the situation where we live now in democracy. And I make pause after this word, after I say democracy. The elites are in most terrible condition, and most countries are ruled by those who do not deserve to be elected. People stopped paying attention to the election process, and those three countries where people started paying attention to whom they elect, they are the ones that I mentioned before: the United States, Ukraine, Israel. So what do you think, how this situation could be corrected, fixed, changed to the better? The world needs their best to be at the forefront. At the elites, there should be people. There should be a group of people that you strive to be a member of. Am I wrong, or it's going to be
No,
a mess?
look, no, you're not wrong at all. Look, you have to differentiate between politicians or people who get elected and those who consider themselves elites. Okay, the academicians, the cultural elites, you name it. I wrote a whole novel.
How it's interconnected somehow.
Of course, it's all society is always interconnected. Everything is interconnected. I wrote a novel, a satirical novel, 25 years ago that just. I was supposed to be in Germany, by the way, today, because a German edition of this satirical novel came out. It's called Iddo Netanyahu. It also translated into Russian, and it talks about these elites. Okay, and I try to expose them in a funny way. I hope it's funny. It's also tragic for what they are. And this was written 25 years ago, and nothing. The truth is, nothing has changed. Okay, I described them in Israel, but it's true for the rest of the West. In Israel, it was much more advanced. I would say the moral corruption and the blindness of these people more advanced than what it was in the West 25 years ago. Now the West has caught up with us. Israel was at the head of the game 25 years ago. Look, it's a problem that I would say begins and starts with academia. The shallowness of the humanities in the West, what they teach, the takeover of the humanities in the West by people of a certain political agenda and a certain way of looking at reality, or even not looking at reality. I mean, the difference I would say between how I view things is I try to see reality for what it is, but they try to look at their ideology and almost ignore reality. Almost say, oh, I don't really care about reality. I know what my ideology is. So if I want to have peace with the Palestinians, I will believe in it to the very end. Okay, there will always be peace with the Palestinians. They don't see the suicide bombings. They don't see what they say, that they want to liquidate us. No, they see it, but they ignore it because they want to have peace with the Arabs or with the Palestinians. And now in Israel, look, obviously this was a shock to the Israeli nation. I think more and more people also. Look, Israel, what happened in Israel? Most of Israelis were for the Oslo Accords, okay? Because who doesn't want peace? And if your elites convince you that Arafat has changed and he wants to have peace and you can live a life of peace, most people, the leaders were convinced about it. And it was foolish, but they were convinced about it. And they were able to convince most of the Israeli population. But then the suicide bombing started. That's how my brother got elected. People started changing their minds. And so reality for many people is a factor, a very important factor, at least concerning what is happening here. And with time, with the Intifada, the second Intifada especially, with more than almost 2,000 people that died. I'm talking about before October 7th, not during the current attack, before. Close to 2,000 people died subsequent to the Oslo Accords. People understood that giving them more territory, giving the PLO more territory and more arms is committing suicide. So the population turned to the right. And this is people who were on the left. Our greatest commentators were former leftists, okay, who turned to the right. Okay. Now, I don't blame the left for wanting peace. This is a natural human wish. Okay, you can't. It's not something that it's almost. You almost have to have to control your emotions very much in order to say, well, you're talking about peace, but I don't really believe you. Okay. It takes a certain amount of self-control to understand that, okay, I have to face reality. I have to look and see what it is. And my decisions have to be based on what's happening, on reality. Unfortunately, the intellectuals in the West don't really care about the reality. They care about their ideology. They think that they know how to fix things, and the facts on the ground hardly matter to them. And that's the big problem of the so-called elites in the West today. And of course, they influence politics, they influence everything. How to change this? Except for me and you talking, I don't know how to change it, okay? Except for writing articles, which I do, and writing novels, and writing plays, which address this very issue. I don't know what to do about it.
As a writer, and maybe this is our last question for this hour.
Good. I'm getting hoarse. Good.
So let me ask the question so you'll have a break from speaking. The question was this unity that Israel demonstrated in the face of this atrocity was something that, I mean, we expected it here in the United States and the relative safety of our existence here. And was it something new? Was it something unexpected to you? What new did you learn for yourself about this response, from this response of Israeli people, what you did not expect from Israel, seeing all the strife and discord of recent months?
No, I expected it very much. I was actually interviewed also in English by Jewish
National
News Service,
News Service,
television, only a few weeks ago, or maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah.
In the middle of the huge strife that was existing in Israel. And I think towards the end of the interview, they asked me about these things. And I said, all these people that are declaring that they will not come anymore to do their reserve duty, pilots and the rest of them, that call for when the time comes, do not go to serve in the army because you don't want to serve this dictatorship, supposedly dictatorship, right? Big dictatorship we have. This nonsense. I said, this will not happen. Okay, all of them to a man will come. If something bad happens, they will come. This is my very words. All of them to a man will come and serve when the time. Little did I know that this would happen only a few weeks after I said these things. Not for a single minute will they not come up for reserve duty, because they want to protect their families. They want to protect their friends. Okay,
Of course.
and so I didn't think this would happen, and I said that we will get through it. This current chasm, just a matter of time, and that we'll become united, because most of the Israeli population believes in the national idea, believes in the cause of Israel, and does not want this country to be erased off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And so this, what is happening now is something that I fully expected to happen if some national catastrophe arises. And if you don't believe me, just check what I said several weeks ago.
I believe you. I checked. I listened to this exact interview
Okay.
a couple of times. So I
listened to it only once, but if you say a couple of times, it's more than me.
No. Trust me. I am. It's hard to get to the skull sometimes.
You prepare yourself for that.
No, I need to read the lines, and then second times I read between the lines, so it takes double time. Iddo, thank you so very much, and it was very important for me to connect with Israel once again, and to confirm our unshaking support of Israel, and victory to you,
yes,
and then to us all.
Thank you very much.